Hey everyone. Sometimes I read on forums and on Facebook people asking about what settings should I have for a particular IP or a particular genre or a feel I'm trying to get in my game when playing Savage Worlds Adventure Edition, Suede. And I'm here to say, you can do a lot with just the core book. You don't have to have a setting.
World, one of the best games today.
Hey everyone, it's Carl with Tabletop Tango. Look at the bubbles, do the stuff. We really appreciate likes, subscribes, all that kind of support. It makes us get all warm and fuzzy when we see it. I don't know if it makes any difference to anything, algorithm or whatever, but it's really fun to see people comment, give their 2 cents, help us learn together, see the subscriber count go up. It's just fun. I mean, and I'm doing this for fun. So, so what do I want to talk about? What I want to talk about is just using Suede for your campaign or for your games without having to worry about a specific setting or a setting book. It can be done very easily. I've done it for I've done it for post-apocalypse. I've done it for sci-fi. I've done it for just a number of other things too. Kind of a Firefly-ish thing. Also use Lost Colony for that. So there's a lot you can do. But the point is, and a secret agent game. And the point is you can use Suede as just your one-stop shop to get most of what you're trying to get done without having a setting. Now, settings are useful because settings really lean into tropes. They really bring cool setting rules or new edges and hindrances that are just so flavorful that it's sometimes just a lot of fun, but you don't need them. And let's talk about why. So let's start with character creation right at the beginning. One of the things that adds really a lot of immersion and settings bring are new ancestries or races or what have you that are very particular to the flavor they're trying to have. Suede's got you covered because there's a whole section on creating your own species, races, ancestries, whatever you want to call them. And it talks about how you trade in and trade out things for points so that you can get just the right feel. And I did that in my post-apocalyptic game. I started with, for a feline race that came from cats, I kind of started with the cat race and tweaked it and modified it. I also did that for something where there's robots in space. And so instead, I used a construct robot already in the book, but I got rid of the outsider hindrance and I added something else to it because that made more sense, right? I mean, like in Star Wars, robots live among us kind of thing, and it's not really they're outsiders. They may be treated as kind of second-class citizens sometimes, but they're not really outsiders in that sense. So anyway, the point being is that you can create your ancestries very easily. Now let's talk about edges and hindrances. Hindrances are interesting because sometimes the hindrances in the settings are very flavorful. Like if you talk about a cyberpunk game, there may be a hindrance where you can't use cyberware. So as you're looking at raw, see if there's a way of kind of taking a limitation that's already there and bring it in to what you're trying to accomplish. Think about what you're trying to accomplish. Is it because they can't use cyberware? Well, then that's just you might just make that a straight hindrance and not because there's no mechanical. Or is it really that using cyberware negatively impacts them? So maybe that's clumsy. Maybe it looks like a quirk that they have or something like that that's already there in Suede that you can take advantage of. Edges, again, settings can make them very flavorful, but I would posit that Suede has a really rich set of edges, from combat to professional edges to just the background edges. There's so much there already that you can probably find something that fits what you're trying to accomplish or the flavor you're trying to get. Now, if you've got a martial arts setting and you have so many different fighting styles, kind of like The Legend of Ghost Mountain has, you're going to run into a little toughness there with making a character as flavorful as you want. And so in some cases like that, if it's really just absolutely such a narrow sliver, maybe you'll need a setting. But for most cases, there are so many edges to choose from a combat, from shooting, from melee, from different attack capabilities, from frenzy. All these make sense in any kind of setting you're using, and so very cool to take advantage of. And you don't need a setting generally. Gear. Settings often bring very specialized gear, or I should say, descriptions of gear that make them sound very specialized and interesting. But in the end, gear tends to be similar. Let's talk weapons primarily. So you've got most range weapons, 2d6, 2d8 levels of damage, kind of the same range you're talking about. Melee weapons, big ones might be strength plus d8, smaller ones, strength plus d4. So everything kind of has that same, because of balance, right? So everything's got kind of that feel, so you got rifles, got a feel to them. And so you can pretty much do whatever you want. So if you've got a new crazy slug thrower for your cyberpunk game that is different, from a style and a look and what have you, and you want to be able to, it's got a laser sight on it and all that kind of stuff, absolutely can be done, but you don't have to buy a setting that's going to list a bunch of gear, and in the end, it's all still 2d6, 2d8, 2d6, 2d8, 2d8, 2d8 plus 1. You don't have to go with that. You can flavor what's already there by looking at kind of what style and sizing of the weapons look like. Setting rules. Now, this is the one where settings shine, because they are called setting rules after all, is they give you a chance to have some specialized rules where you can really lean into the genre, lean into the IP, and that's fine. Like I said, I don't have anything against settings. I love them. I read them all the time, and I take advantage of them in mine. But if you want to go raw, you can. So setting rules are really there to create flavor, and you can create that flavor without a setting rule just by how you describe things, how the feel is. So let's give an example. So in a secret agent game, a setting book might have something on how to create ciphers, or how to, read and write, encrypt messages that you can do a dead drop with, and stuff like that. So you might say, hey, I really need a setting rule around ciphers, but you don't, right? It could be as simple as an opposed roll between the person's using the skill that is appropriate. Maybe it's academics, maybe whatever, and the person who's trying to read the cipher or detect what was in it. Basic rules doesn't require new rules. It just requires applying the existing rules. And I've talked in a lot of videos about dramatic tasks and things like that. So dramatic tasks often can be used for interesting things that the setting rules bring to the table. Like hacking can be a very simple thing. Could be a dramatic task, or it could just be some simple skill rolls. It doesn't have to be complicated unless the complications are really important. Then at some point, if it gets too deep into it, then yeah, you might need a setting book that really lays out, like if you want to do virtual reality combat and you want to have special rules for that, but you don't want to invent them, yeah, there's plenty of chances to take advantage of other settings out there. But I'm trying to say you don't have to. I don't know, maybe I'm not even making my point, but anyway, so you don't need to. So now arcane backgrounds are the next thing I want to talk a little bit about. Issue with Suede arcane backgrounds is they're pretty generic. They have different names, and some start with different number of spell points, different spells, number of spells. But in the end, there's not really a lot that differentiates them mostly. I mean, weird science and stuff like that being kind of a difference. But they don't have, the thing that settings bring to the table is the settings bring in backlash issues, tweaky things, maybe some edges that are specific to a particular arcane background flavor. This is a tougher one. So if you're going to do arcane backgrounds and you want to have stuff that's really flavorful, it might be tougher to do, but you have the ability with Savage Worlds powers and things like that is the skin. to do trapping. So you can trap these things to really need to do what you need to do. So, so let's say you're trying to create someone who can be a ghost in a machine type AB. Obviously, we don't have an arcane background like that. Well, you could start with what makes sense. You can limit the powers that make sense. You know, you don't have to have all of them. What are the kinds of things that make sense for someone who can control machines or put their consciousness into machines or what have you? Then define those trappings. You can add limitations and scale PowerPoints based on those limitations, like things can only be to self. You'll notice that the book does a good guide of, you know, sort of talking about limitations, and you can take advantage of those to kind of flavorful up. And then like this ghost in the machine kind of person, if they're truly a master of it or versus somebody who's just has some incapability, well, now you're starting to get with gifted versus some other arcane background. So you can tweak things and kind of build out your own backgrounds without having to go and find a setting that's going to have lots of features to it. Is it as rich? No. Honestly, it's not going to be as rich as somebody who's gone to the trouble of making a detailed arcane background with new edges and new things that backlash causes, or new constraints that they have, or new abilities that they have based on having those constraints. You're not going to get there. But the bottom line is, in a lot of settings or a lot of things and a lot of IP, the arcane background, the powers and trappings are enough to do what you need to do. And then finally, let's talk about the bestiary. The core book has one in it. It's not extensive, but what you can do with it is, as you're building out new creatures, you can start with what's already in the book and say, is this thing like this thing, and what makes changes to it? And then look at the section where they have the monstrous abilities and things that you can give to creatures or take from creatures. So you can build out the creatures you need for your setting without trying to find a setting book that has a great list of monsters or creatures that you already can get a hold of. They're not that hard to build. Take something close, tweak it, or use the slot in, slot out monstrous abilities to get done what you wanted to do. So these are some thoughts. You can see there's a lot you can do with Suede, but yeah, there's a time where if you're getting too leaned in, yeah, you really do need a setting. I'm just saying you don't have to have a setting. Like I said, I've run a lot of games with just the core book because it's easier for newer players to pick up without having to go and say, okay, now there's edges in this book and there's edges in that book and there's a different race here versus race there versus... It's sometimes just easier, and you can drive the flavor through the storytelling, through trappings, through how things work in the world. You don't necessarily need to have a bunch of setting rules to support that. So anyway, that's what I think. What do you think in the comments? Do you use Suede Raw? And do your campaigns around that? Do you always have a setting book? Do you recommend certain setting books all the time for folks who want certain things, like obviously fantasy companion, superpowers companion? Not really setting books, but why would you not suggest that for folks? And then now we got science fiction companion coming out. So those are easy, right? Don't have to tell me that in the comments. Those are an easy ones. But anyway, so yeah, let's hear what you have to say. So this is Carl with Tabletop Tango. Thanks again. Look at the bubbles, do the stuff. We appreciate all your help and support, and we enjoy doing it. So help us keep doing it. And we'll talk to you later. Bye.
World, one of the best games today. Savage World, Benny, enhance my play. Savage World, different setting any day.